Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kaikis, and today I'm going to be joined by Cindy Goodwin-Sak, Vice President, Global Security Sales Engineering at Cisco. The topic of today's episode is a PreSales Journey. Cindy Goodwin-Sak is no stranger to the PreSales Collective, as she was part of the Executive Council when they merged with PreSales Collective and became part of our leadership group. Cindy was also one of the hosts of our Executive Summit back in October 2020. Cindy has been a tremendous ally to the PreSales Collective and really the pre-sales profession. So in today's episode, we are going to talk about Cindy's journey through her pre-sales career. We're going to talk about what has allowed her to stand out, make a difference, and make an impact. And additionally, talk about some of the challenges that she has faced along the way and what advice she would give herself 20 years ago. Enjoy today's episode. Cindy, welcome to the PreSales Podcast. How are you today?
I am awesome, James. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thanks for joining. I am thrilled to have you on the PreSales Podcast. You are no stranger to the PreSales Collective, as what feels like a long time ago, you were one of the hosts for our Executive Summit back in October, and now you're on the PreSales Collective Advisory Board. So it's been amazing to have you involved and great to get to know you throughout this process.
I've been so incredibly impressed with how you've been able to build a movement around pre-sales. And it seems at the same time, years, but also the blink of an eye. So it's just so impressive.
Timing is a weird place in 2021. I've really enjoyed everything that you've done for PreSales Collective. And one of my favorite things to highlight about you is that when we were planning for the Executive Summit, we had the diversity and inclusion panel. And we were going through the prep, and then you sent me an email and said, "Hey, do you have time?" And I still laugh because you pulled me aside. And the first thing you said to me was, "James, do you trust me?" And I was caught off guard. I can still remember exactly how I felt. And I was like, "What do you mean, Cindy? Of course I trust you." That was like that moment where you put me in my place. And I was, wow, Cindy is providing so much value. This is amazing. And so I've always appreciated that about you and that learning experience that you gave me.
Well, you could tell you were passionate about doing it well. And you were passionate about making sure that this was incredibly impactful. And so I just loved your passion, but I think I had that one. So it's all good. It's all good. It's all from a good place.
I know. Well, thanks, Cindy. So one, congratulations to you on your promotion to vice president. Amazing promotion. Tell us about the new role.
It's absolutely a privilege and an honor to be a VP at a Fortune 500 company. So I have the opportunity to lead the sales engineers for the global security organization at Cisco. So big organization, and at the moment, the fastest growing technology at Cisco. So it is an exciting place to be with brilliant people.
That's amazing. How big is your team?
We have a few hundred people around the globe. We have people that are focused on all different aspects of our business and of all different levels of brilliance. So,
is there anything that's vastly different from your previous role that you're already trying to tackle?
My previous role covered every technology. We were virtual engineers, so in pre-sales for sure, but covering every technology in Cisco's very vast portfolio. In security, it's more about how do we bring focus to the core parts of the business that are going to accelerate growth. So I would say the biggest thing for me is how do you continue momentum on a few key things while driving exponential growth in other areas. And that's been a really interesting balance, and making sure that everyone feels included in that process. Because if you're not on the latest and greatest technology, you might feel a little bit left behind. Well, they're all important. So that's been a unique experience for me.
Oh, that's great. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and best of luck in the new role. I know that you have tons of success just as you have throughout your career. And speaking of which, I really want to talk about you and your pre-sales journey today. Cindy, you've got an awesome experience, especially at Cisco, that I'm really looking forward to talking about. So let's maybe start with, how did you stumble into this pre-sales career?
Stumble is the right word. So I was a post-sales engineer at a partner, an integrator, Cisco integrator. And I had chosen Cisco as my technology focus at that partner because I knew that it was hard. At a partner, as an implementation engineer, you're essentially worth what you can bill, right? So your bill rate is also related to the hotness of the technology, the demand of the technology, and the complexity. And so I went for the most complex things that I could find because I wanted to make more money. I actually was fascinated because it was so hard. And then I just became enamored with Cisco in general because of the breadth of the portfolio and all the different things you could do with it and the depth of expertise that you could come to. And so I said, gosh, I want to work for Cisco. And then I found out about this job. I had no idea it was sales. I just wanted to work for Cisco. And so I stumbled into, to your point, service provider, working for an incredibly large telecommunications company. So they were my customer, doing a technology that I had no clue about. Literally stumbled into pre-sales. And I have to be totally transparent. I wasn't the best pre-sales engineer, but I could build good relationships with my customers because I understood post-sales really well.
That's really important. You made a comment that you joined because the job was really hard. What was it about something that was really hard and really challenging that was so appealing to you at the time?
There was a certain draw to command line. I think that sounds silly, right? I've been in the business for a long time, and anybody can do point and click. Anybody can drive a Windows admin environment. It takes a different kind of person to do command line. Now, the value of that has shifted over the years. And now the value is in automation, it's in scripting, it's in not being hands on the keyboard, but orchestrating everything behind. But I loved the concept of being able to fly through a command line and know what I was doing and troubleshooting. I would say troubleshooting was a key component of that perspective.
That's great. I appreciate you diving into that because a lot of people in their first early jobs, they don't want to take on something that's too hard or too challenging. But I like that you talked about it being the demand and complexity equals the bill rate. And you want to make some money. I love that equation, right?
Yeah, go for the hardest thing you can find because everyone else is taking the easy path.
I love that. So Cindy, you joined Cisco in 2005. You said that you really loved it and enjoyed it. So what was it about the company that really made you want to be a part of it in 2005? And what was it like at Cisco 15 years ago?
I think at the time I was really mostly loyal to the brand and the certifications. I didn't understand the company when I joined it, and I just really got lucky, to be totally honest. But I was enamored by the various certifications I could go after. I could go after, again, really, really hard certifications, the highest in the industry, Cisco Certified Internet Networking Expert, and you could do it in multiple technology areas. So I found that really enthralling. It was working for a brand that I was so loyal to. It was really brand loyalty at the time. I almost got a Cisco tattoo. I almost got those little router icon. Love the company I work for, but I'm really glad I didn't do that. So I don't like an old school router tattoo.
You might regret that one later.
So every job I've had in technology, I was the only female. There was one other woman in a different part of the organization in the same office, but it was the same. I came into Cisco with a single CCIE and with my second one planned. I took my second lab after I joined. So 2 months after I joined, I took my collaboration CCIE. It was called Voice at the time. And what I wasn't expecting was the drive that would bring to the team. So imagine there are no women. So this girl walks in the door and goes and gets her CCIE and the technology they're all supposed to be experts in. And like, time out, we better go get our CCIEs. I was not ready for that. It was a positive competitive experience, but it was really weird being incredibly humble, knowing they know way more than I do, but challenging them to go prove it.
I love that. I mean, challenging the status quo. That's what it's about. So Cindy, I have to ask, what was it like being one of two females in a male-dominated team, especially at the time? And how has that continued throughout your career?
Especially coming to Cisco at the beginning, right? It was a long time ago. We kind of looked at each other a little funny. They're looking at me like, who is this person? I still remember they did invite me to one of their poker games, and which was incredibly awkward, but they were so kind and they never invited me again. And I don't blame them because it was just, we all thought it was kind of weird, but they did. They tried. And early in my career, I dressed like they did because I really just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to not be different. So I wore khakis and a belt and I wore polo shirts with Cisco logos on them. And over time, I would say that was not my peers, that was me. That was a lack of confidence in my own abilities. It was a lack of comfort with who I am or who I was at the time. And so as I grew and as my confidence in my craft grew, I became more confident in showing up as myself. And I would say also my peers became more confident in embracing me, because if you're not confident with yourself, it's really hard for others to do the same. So I would say it was a natural progression of them being incredibly welcoming, but I had to get comfortable with me so that we could all be comfortable interacting together.
That's fair. And I really appreciate you opening up about that. How long into your Cisco career did that moment happen for you?
It really did happen over time. I do remember watching the Amy Cuddy TED Talk. So whenever that came out, I was being a manager or senior manager. I was working on that at the time. And I was like, how am I going to be the senior manager of all these brilliant engineers? Because it just didn't feel like, how could I possibly lead these brilliant people? And she said, fake it till you make it. And I thought, gosh, I didn't realize you could fake confidence. And so that was kind of the beginning of the journey for me, and understanding, if you picture yourself up there, how would you want to look? And then trying to emulate it until you become that. It's a process.
Thanks for sharing that. I have to be transparent that as a white male, I have not really had the situation where I have felt pressure to fit in like you did. And I mean, of course, that does exist at times in different ways, but I have never had to face that as a male. It is always interesting to hear everyone's story and perspective of like what that light bulb moment was. And because so many people face that. I mean, how many times have people joined the podcast that started their career like you 20 years ago in this field, were the only woman or only person of color in an engineering team? I mean, that has to not feel good to not be able to see yourself. So it's good that you had that moment. And I want to make sure that we're asking you about that.
Well, if you don't mind me sharing a story, there was a moment that changed my perspective on my own role in the industry. And I was at this IT conference. I can't remember what it was. And I was there to talk about diversity. And I was sitting in the speaker room at a table full of men. And I was talking about my experience and why I was there. And I made this comment about having to earn the right to sit at the table. So it was a table of white men, and it was me. And these guys had the courage to say, Cindy, we feel the same. I'm like, what do you mean? They said, well, we feel like when we sit at the table with a customer, we sit at the table with an account manager, as pre-sales engineers, we have to earn the right every time that we get dismissed because we're just the engineer, or that we lack credibility until we're given permission. And so it was a moment that really challenged me, because I brought up a couple of different topics in that situation where I felt isolated, and they said, we feel the same. And that was such a defining moment, and actually changed so many conversations I have with so many of my peers at all levels of leadership. Just because we don't talk about it as part of the normal course of work doesn't mean they're not feeling the exact same thing I am. They miss their kids when they're gone. They bring their kids souvenir. Like, we're actually more similar than we think we are in a lot of cases.
Wow, that's an impactful story. I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm honestly surprised to hear that, but it makes sense. It makes sense when you bring that up, and it probably allowed you to get to know them on a closer level and be able to be a little bit more vulnerable with each other. And then allows for a better working experience generally.
And it took courage on their part, right? To say those things.
So Cindy, in the middle of your career, you went and worked on your MBA. So what was the rationale or motivation behind that decision?
I had gotten to a point in my career where learning the same technologies over and over again was not exciting to me. A breadth of technologies that I'd learned, and I just lost my passion for learning the next new feature of the same technology. And so I was like, what's the next challenge? And that was leadership for me. And I decided I didn't know enough about business to be an effective SE leader. I felt like the rationale was, I'm going to go get my MBA to learn more about business, or at least be more knowledgeable.
Would you say that MBA gave you the knowledge or the confidence to be a good people leader?
I don't know that it had anything to do with people leadership. The best things I've learned about people leadership have been from books and from podcasts. The MBA gave me the confidence to understand the various aspects of business and to know the areas that I needed to dig more deeply in. So I knew just enough that when I needed to have a different conversation, I could dig deeper, or I could do my own homework around those things.
That's interesting, because I've had a couple of people reach out to me and ask me like, hey, do you think that I should get an MBA to get into leadership? And I'm glad that you have said that, because I don't think that you absolutely need to have one to get into leadership. But, it can help you learn the business side of things if you don't have that understanding. But it's not going to be this, hey, I just got my MBA, I'm ready for leadership. And that's the correlation that does not exist.
Not in tech, in my opinion. It does in some worlds, more regulated worlds. But when I see somebody apply for a manager position or a senior leader position and they have an MBA, it's just more of a, oh, that's nice. It's not a big motivator for me. It's just another feature. It's not an exciting one. Sorry.
Spoken like a true SC. I love it. Well, speaking of education, Cindy, fast forward a couple of years, you started on a doctorate, which you are near completion on. Congratulations. So what was it about the program that was appealing to you that you wanted to go and take that next step to get your doctorate?
I love learning. And so structured learning has always been great. I've been trying to figure out how I can be a lifetime student. I'm still working on that. But over my career, I have accumulated a number of questions that I've been unable to answer. So I think good SEs are curious. And it's something that I've taken into leadership and curiosity. And so I had some really interesting questions that I could not figure out how to answer, and no one else seemed to be able to answer them. And so I found this DBA, and the Doctorate of Business Administration is designed to pair practitioners or executives with academics and teach them how to work. And in the end result is supposed to be that academics create more relevant research in business because they're paired with executives that have access to data and real problems. So I learned to do my own research, and I built a network of academics to help me solve some of the problems that I've encountered. And I'm super excited that I'm about to solve one of the biggest questions that I've had for the last 11 years at Cisco.
Wow. Are you allowed to share what that question that you're trying to solve is?
Sure, yeah. Ever since I moved to St. Louis, I had SEs all over the Midwest and account managers, but they weren't paired. I had SEs that had really deep specialization in certain areas, and I struggled to get the SE and the AM to work together if they were from different cities, even if the SE was the best collaboration engineer in the market. But once they got together physically and met each other in person, they would work together. And so I have been trying to figure out how to accelerate the relationship, the trust relationship between the seller and the expert in a virtual environment for 11 years. And it's even more relevant now, obviously, given the environment that we're in and moving to hybrid work in the longer term. So I won't give you the details, but I'll tell you, I think I found some really cool things that'll not only help us accelerate that trust relationship, but it'll help us overcome some of our biases that we experience in the workplace when we first meet people. So it's exciting to me.
That's thrilling. I'm really excited. I hope that you'll be publishing that information at some point, and that could be readily found on the internet, because I am very curious to hear the results of that, because I'm sure that there are many people listening that have that problem all the time, whether it's they're an individual contributor partnered with their sales peer, or they're a leader trying to solve the same problems that you are today.
I will put it in blog format because no one wants to read academic writing.
When it's like 150 pages, it could be a little bit tough. So Cindy, you've done this DBA. How impactful has this been to your day-to-day career?
Incredibly impactful. It has taught me not only deeper details in things like supply chain and finance and all the things that you would expect out of a master's degree, but it also taught me how to do research in each one of those areas, how to solve problems in each one of those areas. But most importantly, it taught me how to ask better questions. So as a business leader, if you don't ask the right questions, you can't get to the root of challenges, or you can't get to the right solution. And so I have to say, the most valuable thing I've taken out of the last 4 years is I know how to ask better questions, and I know how to challenge data. And so they say figures lie and liars figure, right? I know how to figure out when somebody's lying to me for data. So it's been amazing. It's been transformational, really.
I love that you talk about being transformational. Speaking of which, in your nearly 16 years at Cisco, I know that you've accomplished a lot. Is there a specific project that you've done that you felt like really made an impact on the organization and even made an impact on yourself as a leader?
I can talk a little bit about it. It's one of those things I think is still a bit of the secret sauce of Cisco, but the previous team I was on did a lot of work around automation. And the goal was to reduce the time it takes to find an expert or to engage an expert at Cisco. And so within that particular team, they had built some machine learning and AI into their automation that allowed them to understand the complexity of the work that needed to be done and get it to the right person quickly. That was an amazing impact to the organization. And then from what we learned, we were able to challenge our own status quo and think differently around how we access our experts around the entire company and get faster time to expertise. Because really what matters, the customer wants to talk to an expert in their challenge as fast as possible. And so that's been one of the things I'm most proud of. It was not my accomplishment, it was my team's accomplishment.
That's incredible. And is this the project where you cut time pretty much from like 48 hours to 15 minutes?
Yeah, the team did. And a portion of their work, they took what was being done manually by a vendor group of ours and automated all of it. And it has its challenges. Nothing's perfect in the first round. But 48 hours to 15 minutes to get an expert or an answer to your question, which is just fantastic. Yeah.
That's amazing. You've done a lot with AI and ML, right?
Yep.
So what is it about AI and ML that is so attractive to you? Because I think there's so many pre-sales professionals out there who have a baseline understanding of what AI and machine learning can actually do, but it can actually be quite intimidating when you start peeling back the layer.
It's actually not AI and ML that are interesting. It's automation. And so I tell my team, you need a higher level purpose. AI and ML is a subset of AI, right? A lot of people think of it as the solution to everything, and it's not. If you think about a higher level purpose of automating all of your low complexity work or automating anything that's repetitive, what can you do that allows you to spend more of your time doing more impactful work? And then you search for the tools that allow you to do that. AI and ML might be part of that. So the team, when they built that, it was essentially like a skills-based routing engine that instead of using humans to route work, they used skills-based routing. It's been around for a long time, but when you use deep learning to assess the complexity of a solution, that's a whole new ballgame. But it's making sure that you understand enough about the technology to identify the point tools within the umbrella of AI and ML to use the right tool for the situation. So I would encourage more people to think less about AI and ML and more about automating work to give themselves time to spend solving more complex issues. But AI and ML might be part of the tool set.
That's good to know. And that's a great perspective to look at this situation. You talked about making sure your team had more impactful work or giving back. Why do you have that philosophy, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I think they did a study of call centers and they asked them, do you love your routine job or do you like higher order, more impactful work? And I think everybody wants to know that the work that they do is meaningful and fulfilling. And so if you end up doing repetitive tasks, it can fill the day, but did you get joy from that? And so in 99% of the cases, we're not trying to eliminate cost or remove someone's job. We're trying to think differently about how we run our business so that we can be more competitive and so that our people feel more fulfilled. And that's where I think we've really excelled.
One, I love that because I'm glad that you as a leader have that type of philosophy. I've heard nothing but great things about Cisco. It's usually ranked one of the top places to work. Would you say that you feel that across the organization and most of the products and most of the organizational structure of that philosophy of impactful work?
Absolutely. It is the number one place to work in a lot of countries. I think it's amazing. I've worked for a lot of different companies, and I can tell you, in my opinion, the grass is not greener on the other side. The thing that I love about it and that I try to bring to my own team is the opportunity to show up as who you are, to show up with your full self and to be embraced for who you are, which requires everyone respect each other. And the opportunity to give back, actually goals of giving back to 1 billion people on the planet, impacting 1 billion people personally on the planet. And that's built into everything that we're doing as a company. And I think it shows up in our products and our people and our processes. So I think that the whole company embodies that. And I think that's one of the reasons that so many of us stay, because we can contribute to something that has a higher purpose.
How do you create an environment where people can show up as themselves and they can bring their full selves to work? Because I think that that's one of the hardest things to cultivate is that type of culture. And there's a lot of studies out there that 60% of employees are actually disengaged in their work. So how do you create that type of environment?
I think a lot of it is modeling the behavior for our leaders and our people, being vulnerable, I think I've mentioned this before, James, but I remember when I essentially created a micro inequity, right? It was almost a microaggressive behavior against another female at Cisco. And I stepped back and I saw what I did. It was so powerful and painful for me, but it's acknowledging that we're all human and being willing to do so publicly. I think if we all talk about these types of things in the open with our people and with others, it creates an environment where others have to question their own behavior. And I will say that in general, what I've seen Cisco do as a company, when we see people who create a negative environment, we either attempt to address it or they're just simply told, if you can't behave in an open and accepting way, then this isn't the place for you. And I think that's the environment we have to create. And I will tell you that I do tell a lot of women at Cisco that there's this concept. Sometimes women can be competitive against each other and they can hold other women back. I tell folks all the time that it is absolutely unacceptable in our environment. We help each other, we lift each other. And I think that's the philosophy we need to take to every individual.
Cindy, thank you so much for sharing that. It's super impactful. And you're right. The idea of lifting each other up and we're all on the same team, we're all on the same boat, going in the same direction, right, is really important. And sometimes people don't always see that. So it's great that you brought that up. I am curious, if you had to rewind 20 years and give yourself some career advice, what would it be?
It's universally the same. Every time someone asks me this question, part of my core value structure is humility. I believe that people should be humble, and it's just how I was brought up and what I believe. I wish that I had known a long time ago that you could both exude confidence and be humble at the same time, that you could be curious, humble, and confident, and they can coexist. And so I wish I had known earlier that you can show up in a room and maybe feign confidence or pretend to be confident, as Amy could take it, you become it. And it does not mean that you're not humble, because they're different. And I give a lot of people the same advice. It's okay to show up as confident as long as you're curious and humble.
Great advice, Cindy. Cindy, I've really enjoyed having you on the PreSales Podcast today. Before I let you go, I have to ask one final question. As I mentioned in the beginning, you've been a tremendous supporter and ally to me and to PreSales Collective. I can already hear it in the give back and make meaningful work answers that you've had. But why do you join the PreSales Collective, and why do you give back to this community and this profession specifically?
I think it's because I'm not a good pre-sales engineer, right? You use your strengths. And I see these amazing, brilliant sales engineers, pre-sales engineers all around me. And I really do believe that I was a better post-sales engineer. I just really do believe it. But I have my own superpowers in my network and other things that I can do to empower those with really amazing pre-sales skills. And so I think part of it is that I'm envious and I want to learn more from all these incredible pre-sales engineers. And I know that I have something to bring that will empower them to be even bigger and have more impact.
Cindy, thank you so much for joining today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate all that you do, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, James.
Have a good one.
You too.
All right, PreSales Collective, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I always enjoy my conversations with Cindy. She's a wonderful person. She's a great leader, and she's an inspiration to us all. She's had such a remarkable career and journey at Cisco. And when we were talking about the podcast episode, one of the things that I didn't want to focus on was the fact that she was a female in a male-dominated industry. It isn't fair to her to be always talking about that situation, because if you look at her career and what she's accomplished, regardless of her gender, it is unbelievable. But it is very important to talk about some of the things that she faced in her career and those challenges that she had to overcome when she talked about having to dress like her male counterparts and wear khakis and wear a polo and to fit in. It is too often that too many people feel those same pressures to fit in so that they can do their job. And I love that Cindy said that she had the confidence. She had that moment where it was time for her to be herself and bring her whole self to work. One of the traits she talked about successful SEs or successful leaders is the curiosity. And great SEs are curious. That is one of the things that you could bring to the table as a solutions engineer, is always trying to ask why, or trying to learn more and to put the pieces together. And she talked about trust. Trust is a major component, and what she's done in her projects with AI and machine learning and automation, and how her team uses trust to solve problems is really unique. It shows Cindy and Cisco's approach to problem solving. All right, PreSales Collective, as always, please like and share the PreSales Podcast. If you have a topic that you'd like to hear about, you have a guest that you'd like to nominate, would you like to nominate yourself for a PreSales Collective episode, please reach out to me in the PreSales Collective Slack. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.